of the Colorado Neurodiversity Chamber of Commerce. And that is the first and currently the only Chamber of Commerce in the United States dedicated to advancing neurodiversity in business and neurodivergent individuals in leadership and entrepreneurship. So I thought it might start just with some terms and definitions because terminology can be scary and trip people up. So when we talk about neurodiversity, we are talking about diversity of human brains. So no one person is neurodiverse. One person can be neurodivergent. A group of people who consist of individuals who are neurodivergent and neurotypical would be considered neurodiverse. So really, when we think about our workplaces, some ideal scenarios when we think about diversity and inclusivity is to have a mixture of individuals who think differently and who learn differently. And as we can see, we'll see a little bit when I go on further, that research has pretty consistently shown that if you have neurodiverse teams, meaning a variety of ways of thinking and learning and perspectives, that your organization or your company is guaranteed basically to be a lot more productive, up to 30% more productive in some cases, studies have shown. So as I mentioned, so if you're talking with somebody who identifies as neurodivergent, that just means having a brain that functions in a way that is different from what society has classified as quote unquote normal, right? So societal standards or normed references. Okay. So I think some of the more challenging things to think about when we think about neurodiversity, and I'll share some neurodivergent identifications, can be anything from autism to ADHD to dyslexia, dyspraxia, learning differences, individuals with brain injury, either acquired or otherwise. Individuals who have suffered for a very long time with significant anxiety and depression, such that it changes their neural pathways. They're all good examples of neurodivergent identifications. There are a lot more, so I didn't mention all of them, but it kind of gives you an idea of the broadness of the scope. And for years and years, and all you have to do is get on Google and you will see stories after stories of people who are rejected or fired after disclosing disclosing that they're neurodivergent. Since in the 17 months since we started the chamber, we've heard these stories in person, personal recollections, and just people, sharing how they felt that they had to disclose or could disclose, did, and then things didn't go so well. And on the flip side of that, there are more people, thankfully now, who are in organizations who are more neuro-inclusive, who feel that they can disclose and it has gone better. However, there's still a lot of fear around this. There's still a long way to go. 2020 was 4 years ago, but this statistic in terms of managers surveyed who admitted they wouldn't hire neurodivergent candidates hasn't gotten a whole lot better. Although I will say the United Kingdom and Australia are a little bit further ahead of us here in the United States in terms of neuro-inclusive practices. One of the key things that we hear from neurodivergent individuals who are in the workplace or who are trying to sustain in the workplace is that they mask almost all of the time. And that just means basically masking some symptoms or masking the way that they truly operate to fit in. And that can be pretty, that has a lot of consequences. So masking has been shown to cause huge increases in things like anxiety and depression, which kind of compounds other issues and make it much harder for people to practice and work. So a good way for that to not happen is for individuals to feel like they can present as their true selves in their workplace, either remotely or in person. And I am timing myself, so I'm not going to go over because I could talk about this stuff all day. So we know that 20% of the global population identify as neurodivergent, and that's true for the United States as well. And I did mention, there's a lot that kind of encompasses neurodiversity and neurodivergent identifications, but We know that 1 in 5 individuals think and learn differently than the neurotypical population. So think about your employees, think about your friend groups. If there's more than 5 people, then you are already surrounded by neurodivergent individuals. Sometimes when we say this with employers, we say, you should be interested in learning more about neurodiversity because you already have neurodivergent employees, unless you're just a one-person show, right? You already have neurodivergent employees. You should already be thinking about how can your practices help retain those employees, make those employees more happy in their workplace. Turnover is really tough right now, so is recruitment. So these are things that people are getting extremely interested in, and for very good reason, not only because of the human side of it, right, wanting to be more inclusive and neuro-inclusive, but also, you know, quite frankly, for the bottom line too. It makes a difference. So about 85% of autistic college grads are unemployed, which I just can't wrap my head around that stat. I'm sure everybody else who talks about on this panel is going to feel the same about this. It's completely unacceptable. And that's why these amazing folks who are on this panel are doing such great work in these areas. But if we look at neurodivergent individuals as a whole, unemployment is still unacceptable. I mean, we're talking about a national unemployment rate of about, I don't know, I didn't Google it today, but like 3%, let's say, give or take. And about 30 to 40% of neurodivergent adults are either unemployed or underemployed. And I think that's a key piece there, right? It's not just not being able to get a job, it's not being able to keep a job. And I mentioned more of the kind of facts around masking. One of the things that has been really interesting for us over the past couple of years is that despite being in the name, neurodiversity has broadly been missing from diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. A lot of DE&I efforts kind of focus on specific groups, which is absolutely understandable. But the way that we like to think about neurodiversity is if you're inclusive of all human brains, then you're inclusive of all human beings, right? So if you look at something with a neurodivergent inclusive lens or a neuro-inclusive practices and approaches, then you're all person inclusive. And it sometimes helps to think about it like that, because it doesn't seem like such a siloed effort, right? You can have a lot of practices that really help a lot of individuals by thinking in with neurodiverse lens. And I will get into some practical tips on that. There's lots of benefits of hiring, neurodiverse hiring, as I mentioned, having a variety of ways of thinking and perspectives on your team. Neurodivergent individuals have been credited with some of the things that you see in your screen here. By and large, a lot of the neurodivergent folks that I'm really lucky to work with on my team are so creative and imaginative, and it's just amazing. And there's also a lot of dependability and reliability, which I'm sure Sam and Jonathan will kind of talk about as well. And that's such a key piece when we're thinking about retention and how important it is to have loyal teams. So lots of benefits there. Neuro-inclusive practices, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide because I do feel like it's really important, and it's where some of those nuggets of practical tips and information can come in. So when we're talking about neuro-inclusive practices, let's think first about recruitment and retention, right? Let's think recruitment first of all. How many people, and I won't wait for a show of hands, but I'll just ask the question. How many people have read job descriptions where it says things like excellent communication skills required? It's such a standard thing to see on job descriptions. And we worked with a wonderful group who had this as a standard. It was literally copy paste formatted into every single job description. And the job that they were recruiting for specifically was mechanical. So it said excellent communication skills required. And I asked a couple of questions. I said, okay, if this is true, which it didn't end up being true, but if it was true, what kind of communication? Are we talking about email communication? Is it written communication or verbal communication? Is it interpersonal skills? Is this person going to be customer facing? Will they have to deal with customer complaints? Because communication can mean a lot of different things. So our ask to people who will listen is to please be extremely specific. If you do need excellent communication skills, be specific about what that is. When I was hiring for an executive assistant, I specifically said written. It doesn't need to be spoken communication. This person is going to be sending emails. It just has to be well laid out emails. That's what I'm looking for. And it's okay to ask for things that are part of the job description. You just have to be clear about that. And on the flip side, if excellent communication skill is not required because you're working on a car and you're never going to be customer facing, then do not put that on the job description, because it is tried and true, shown time and time again. Neurodivergent people will not apply for that job. So just by having that on the job description, you are counting out a whole bunch of people who won't even apply. So you don't even have the chance to meet them to be neuro-inclusive. You've already stopped those individuals from applying for that job. So just really think about that. Then when we talk about retention, things like having really clear onboarding processes is so important. Sometimes people hear accommodations and feel scared that that will cost money, but some of the things that we do at Firefly is we have buddies. So basically somebody comes on the job, they have a buddy who they partner with. It helps both the current employees and the incoming employees, and it makes new employees feel really empowered to be able to ask questions. I kind of talked about some of the access barriers, and I'm running out of time a little bit. So in terms of standard processes, I think in HR and recruitment, there's a lot of great AI support, and there's a lot of screening measures and processes. But I would just caution to make sure that those measures and anything automated is not picking out certain words in resumes and counting people out. So basically look at your algorithms and make sure your algorithms are inclusive. And that's not just for neurodiversity. I think that's an issue in the diversity spheres as a whole. So just making sure that some of those standard processes are clearer. On the management side, man, I could talk about management all day. Neuro-inclusive management, setting extremely clear expectations. And I might go to the next slide because some of this is on here. Setting really, really clear expectations. Making sure feedback is direct and clear. Neurodivergent individuals, in some cases, cannot really well interpret vague social cues or looks of disapproval, or so say what you mean and mean what you say. Personality-based interviews. I literally just met with a past client of mine, and like maybe just before this call, and he's having a really hard time getting a job, and he's having a lot of phone screening interviews, not even Zoom. And he just said to me, he's like, I just find it really, really hard to be on the phone with someone. And you know, his social skills is where his struggles are. Everything else is a huge strength. So having those personality-based interviews in a phone screen counts him out every single time, and it's just not fair. So project-based interviews, making sure interviews are more kind of were on the job related is crucially important. You don't need a person who's going to be your best friend. You need someone who's going to be a great worker. And then I think one of the things I just wanted to touch on is people ask us a lot, like, what can I do next? And I think it's okay to ask questions. That is, you know, go somewhere where you can ask questions. The chamber is a great place for that. Seek out education. If you're doing this for long enough, your algorithms on LinkedIn will push all kinds of education to you. That's all I see on my LinkedIn these days, which is kind of awesome. And then just think about open communication and be the company where you are showing that there's inclusive practices in place. Because another thing that people ask all the time is, well, how can I get people to disclose? Well, you can't ask, but you can walk the walk, and then people will start to feel that this is an organization that they can actually communicate with. A quick plug for both Firefly and the Chamber of Commerce. So at Firefly, we have support for individuals of all ages. I'm happy to talk with anybody about either of those organizations. With Firefly, we specifically work with those on the autism spectrum. And then for the Chamber of Commerce, again, it's a lot of education on lifting up neurodivergent voices and sharing about neurodivergent owned businesses and everything you would expect from a Chamber of Commerce in this realm. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Amanda. And next, we're going to have some representatives of Blue Star Recyclers.
Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we are. I think if you go to slideshow up at the top, Sam.
Yeah, I'm just making sure you can see it here. Okay. Well, this is a very old, grainy picture, but it's an important one. So I'm not going to go into too much of the backstory, um, just because we're short on time a little bit. But basically going back to what Amanda was saying was we discovered 15 years ago that specifically at first, folks on the autistic spectrum just had an innate ability to do step-by-step process-based work better than anybody that I've ever seen. I came on about 8 years after we had started, and I had worked in operations for about 15 years, um, and I was shocked immediately just that again back to some of the things that Amanda was pointing to with accountability, and I'll get into some of the specifics a little bit later in the presentation, but um, especially now when you look at the amount of turnover, not just in our industry but just across the board, it's bad out there, and it's an embarrassment to me that we're not opening these channels to look at other folks to do this work. And one of the things that we found out very quickly was that in our interview process, we actually did start out with a sit down across the desk interview, and it became very clear very quickly that that was not the way to do this. So we started a few years after we started doing working interviews. So we don't ask a lot of times. Either the caregiver or the parents will offer up what the diagnosed disability is, but for us, it's just connecting a person with a job, and it's just all about the assets. It's asset-based employment. It's nothing to do with their deficits. And again, when what we found out really quickly is that across the board, in many ways, this was just a much better option for us. And you know, the this is an important thing for me because I think that there's a difference between a job and meaningful work. So I think that there are a lot of companies that might be trying to dip their feet in this pool, but there's a tendency, I think, to um, put these folks in jobs that don't align at all with their assets. So you're not going to get much out of an employee if they're passionate about working with computers, but you just have them sweeping floors every day. And so I think it comes down to just the difference between having the quote unquote token employees and actually integrating people into your workforce. And a lot of people that come to Blue Star talk about the culture that we have, and I think that management does a fantastic job um, with that. But that being said, when you have employees that come to work every single day with an amazing attitude and want to be there and want to, and that's probably easily the best part of their day. It makes it really hard as a management employee to have a bad day. So I think it is just like everything else along the last 10 years I've been doing this, that all the credit has to go to our employees because they're the ones that carry this and that keep us with our eye on the prize. And just a little bit about what Blue Star does specifically. So we're an e-waste recycler with the social mission of employing folks with autism and other disabilities. And it really just kind of aligned well. I mean, you got 50 million people. This has grown exponentially, I think. And much less than 25% are actually participating in the workforce. And then we have a huge e-waste problem in the United States. We're less than 20% of the e-waste that we're generating is actually being recycled or repurposed in any way. So it's two gigantic issues that we're able to attack on with one goal in mind here. So again, our mission is just to recycle electronics to create jobs, and in the last couple of years, we've really been moving that forward, not just in our industry, but outside of our industry, because there's so many parallels. If you look at, if I go into any warehouse or office building, it doesn't make any difference. I can identify multiple jobs that they're having huge turnover issues with that our folks would just be amazing at. So just I'm going to skip this slide actually, because I just really want to get to the meat of this, which is again, asset-based employment, the working interviews. A lot of what Amanda was saying is what we learned kind of on the go, and that's part of having a culture where you can feel comfortable talking to anybody. And so a lot of the systems that we have in place were an employee coming to us and go, I can't learn that way, or I can't communicate that way. It's and creating that culture is so important, because you don't ever want to have any employee, whether they're neurodivergent or not, that doesn't feel comfortable coming to a manager or coworker and saying this doesn't work. So I think this is probably the most important slide. And this is the one that I really, if I could send one slide that I have hundreds of to any employer, is this: since 2009, zero absenteeism, less than 10% annual turnover. Lost time accidents that's a little iffy, because it's myself and my management team have been injured multiple times because we don't follow the rules and protocols that we have in place. But our employees, when we give them a training on what they're supposed to do and how it's supposed to be done, they don't deviate from that, so they don't get hurt. And typically, it's like lifting something that's too heavy for you to lift, and that's something I've been guilty of many times, thrown my back out because I don't pay attention to the rules that we have in place. And then 98% task on-task engagement is another crazy one, where we had a study done several years ago that so they spent 3 months at our facility and tracked the on-task engagement, and came up, it was 98.6 something percent. So when they're doing the work, they are almost 100% engaged in it. So they're not looking at their phones, they're not on Facebook, they're not doing anything like that. And the guy that did the study for us actually joked that if we didn't bother him, it would have been much higher. It would have been 100%. So again, this is just another slide to hammer that home, just especially in the e-waste industry. These numbers are insane. Annual turnover is 200%, and absenteeism is off the charts as well. So I think the best way to describe it is that you might have a slightly longer ramp up period for the employees, but once they're trained and they have it, you have an employee for life. All right, and then I think this is the last slide here. So I'm going to hand this over to Jonathan, and Jonathan has a really interesting perspective, because he's not just our business development manager, but he's also the father of one of our employees, Ian, who's pictured here. And there's probably some parents on the call here, and I just thought it was really important to get his perspective.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, so as Sam said, I am the business development manager at Blue Star, and the young man on the screen here is my son, Ian. As he was growing up, so in 1995, he was 2 years old. He wasn't talking yet. We thought maybe he had hearing impairment. So we took him to the doctor. They referred us to a developmental specialist who diagnosed him with autism. And as he was growing up, we realized he had some amazing skills, particularly looking at following any sort of methodical process. So his very favorite things to do were to put together Lego kits and Bionicles, things like that. And he would do them quickly, perfectly, and with absolutely no issues following the step-by-step instructions. And I had no doubt in my mind that as he got older and he was looking at getting into the workforce, that would be a major part of what he was doing. Similarly, I was a Special Olympics coach, assistant coach for several years, and got to work with a number of different special needs young adults there. And same thing, I got to see some amazing skills and absolutely some challenges as well. But there were some amazing skills that were not present in neurotypical peers. And then as Ian got older, and once he got into high school, I think every special needs parent has that shift of what can I do best for my child now to what's going to happen to them when they grow up, what's going to happen to them as an adult. When he went into the transitions program in the Jefferson County schools, they did a wonderful job with life skills and job skills. And then they placed him with a job at one of the fast casual pizza places, and they had him folding pizza boxes. And there was no question at all that this was, oh, sure, we can find something easy enough for him to do. And I'm sure that they were busy enough that it didn't even occur to them to try to train him to doing something more complex than that. It was, here's something he can do, and they put him to work doing it. And both Sam and Dr. Kelly, you had mentioned the issue with underemployment, the issue with seeing the deficit rather than seeing the assets. And that was something that we were not expecting. And then in 2014, as Ian was getting to the point where he was about to age out of transitions, we heard an interview on Colorado Public Radio with Bill Morris, the founder of Blue Star, talking about Blue Star and saying that they were getting ready to open a Denver location. And so absolutely, we had Ian apply there. He went through the working interview, and he was one of the first group of technicians that was brought on when Blue Star opened their Denver location in 2015. And it has been life-changing for him and for our family, and unquestionably for his coworkers. What Ian does, what you can see him doing on the workbench there, along with his coworkers on the bench, is they take apart computers, and they do it exactingly. They do it thoroughly. They take out every screw, every part. They sort out the 5 different grades of circuit boards, the 2 different grades each of aluminum and copper, all of the different parts, and they put them into the exact right bin to get sorted. And it's the kind of thing that a neurotypical worker is just going to find tedious, but someone whose brain is going to grasp onto consistency is going to do an amazing job, and they're going to do better than any of their neurotypical peers. So 2 years ago, when I had the opportunity to come on at Blue Star as one of the operations managers and lead one of these teams, it was, number one, it was absolutely, yes, I do want to do that. I want to be part of this. But I had seen Ian, I had seen some of his peers in Special Olympics, but seeing just the skill set that the neurodiverse workforce has is just, it has been amazing. And Blue Star has a number of the posters up around with the quote attributed to Albert Einstein that everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's going to think that it's an idiot. And very much what Blue Star has shown, that if you hire someone with this supposed disability and you put them in the right role and you give them the tools to succeed, it's not a disability, it's a superpower. And that really has been, as a parent and then going into management at Blue Star, it's just been amazing. So thank you so much for that, Sam.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I think everyone is probably thinking the same thing that I am thinking, which is we owe you a lot of gratitude for sharing your story. So thank you very much for that. Next, we're going to have Laura from Tall Tales Ranch, who I think is probably teeing up her presentation as we speak. There it goes. I think you're still on mute though, Laura.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Let me make that bigger. And okay. Is that good?
It is.
Okay. I'm Laura McKenna, Executive Director of Tall Tales Ranch. We're a nonprofit that provides support for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We actually started about 10 years ago with the goal of actually creating a residential community. That is actually a three-tiered goal, I would say, in that we know, like Tim had mentioned before, housing and jobs really go hand in hand. And so our founders, the Moonies, their vision for their son, Ross, who has an acquired brain injury, like all of the other parents that are probably on this call and so many of the ones that we work with, and I'm a parent too of a son with a developmental disability, is what's going to happen to them when I am not able to take care of them anymore, when I'm older, when I move on. And so we want them to have a full quality of life. So we felt like there's three things that they need that Ross needed, Ross's friends and all of the other parents that we talked to, is safe, stable, dignified housing, meaningful employment, and a community where people are valued for who they are. And that we really want that to be a neuro-inclusive community, not just one where only people with intellectual and developmental disabilities live. And so we are creating this. And I say we are creating it in that it's not built yet, but we have all of our final plans done. We've been provided land in Lone Tree right at Ridgegate and I-25. All our architectural plans are completed at this point, and we hope to break ground by the end of the year. But our goal is to have 28 apartment units for individuals with IDD and neuro-inclusive friends, to have an on-site coffee shop and community event barn for employment opportunities, and then multiple activities. We're right across from the light rail station. So we know there'll be lots of opportunities for the people that are going to live there. But the reason for that is these are just a few stats. I'm not going to go over a lot of this, but I kind of want to just hit on at least the whole wait list idea and people being able to have access to housing who have intellectual disabilities. And even when they come off the wait list, there's really not very much for them. And so our goal, because group homes are going away, there are host home options, some group homes, personal care alternatives, but most people remain with their parents. Because I know for me, I think host homes have been a great option for some people, but my son, Noah, has no interest in being in somebody else's family home. He would just stay with me versus being able to try to live on his own. So basically what happens then is the parents are everything. They're the caregivers, the drivers, they provide social engagement, they provide housing, they're day program providers. And we know that those individuals want something else from their life and not just their parents being solely responsible for them. So the thing that makes Tall Tales unique for us is that its location allows access to so much, including jobs. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but we are across the street literally from the light rail station at Ridgegate and I-25. So people can walk to the light rail. We'll be doing training on how to use public transportation. Lone Tree has what's called the Lone Tree Link, which is a free transportation system for anybody that lives in Lone Tree and goes to anywhere within Lone Tree. That will be a huge access because, as most of you are probably aware, transportation is one of the biggest issues that our individuals face with being able to get to work, being able to engage in social activities, go shopping. So this provides a great opportunity for them. It will be a neurodiverse community. We'll have concierge service, some 24/7 staffing, on-site employment opportunities, but also off-site employment opportunities. And then, as I said, access to jobs and recreation. So right now, we've been doing this for about 9 years now. So it's mostly been fundraising for our community, but we also have a neuro-inclusive integrated young professional board who make lots of interesting decisions for us and talk about what they want Tall Tales to be like. But we've also, instead of waiting for our coffee shop to be built, we actually created a Tall Tales coffee company. So we have a coffee trailer, and we've employed 22 individuals that work on the coffee trailer, where we go to different events and companies and sponsored programs and teach people how to work in a coffee shop, whether it's mobile, and hopefully that will then translate into when we actually have our brick and mortar coffee shop. And I'm going to talk more about the coffee company in just a second, but I'm not going to go a lot into this because Amanda and Sam have talked just about how there's such a huge need for employees out there, and our group is not being tapped into that employment cycle, and therefore they're primarily unemployed. I know that for my son, who's 26, and so many of what we call our ambassadors, once they finish the special ed transition program, and I'm going to agree with that my son and so many of our ambassadors had phenomenal experience in the transition programs. We were in Cherry Creek schools. We've heard great things about Douglas County, Jefferson County, but everybody says the same thing. They fall off a cliff as soon as the transition program is over. There's just so many really viable employment opportunities for them. And so they tend to stagnate. So with that, that's why we decided, let's do the Tall Tales Coffee Company. And I just have to tell you that none of us knew how to run a coffee company. Our coffee manager does an amazing job, and she doesn't even drink coffee. So we had this huge learning curve, but we purchased a trailer, we outfitted it, we got it all set up with the espresso machines and the coffee makers. And basically, we created employment opportunities for we have 22 individuals right now that work for the Tall Tales Coffee Company. Like I said, we go to different events. We have companies like Kiewit, Schwab sponsor the coffee trailer. We give coffee out to their events and their employees. It's been just a great opportunity for those individuals who are especially underemployed and need to have the support of one-on-one job coaching that we can provide. And so been a really positive things for a lot of our individuals, but the goal then for some of them is that it would lead to other employment as well. We do annual reviews, we do interviews, we do on-the-job training. And so it was originally thought to be like a bridge program for our brick and mortar building, but it will be both. We will have the brick and mortar coffee shop, but we will have continue to have the coffee company, because it's also a great way to get to basically advertise what great employees these individuals are. So this, I think, Amanda, you really touched on this, and I think it's really, really critical. This is such an important thing, because we want to go beyond just having the coffee company. We know a lot of individuals really are eligible for community-based employment, would be great at it. And the problem isn't necessarily the individuals with the disabilities, but the employers and understanding how to employ these individuals. So we have a big mismatch between individuals and the jobs that they're interested in. Therefore, they don't do well. They don't stay on the job. They have access point on often is just DVR. And so those job coaches don't know the individuals and what their needs, desires, skills, and abilities are. And so then if they do get hired, the training is not catered to their learning needs. I loved what Sam talked about with what you're doing at Blue Star, and that you catered the interview process and the training needs to the individuals that you're hiring. So in a lot of places, it's just not embedded into the company culture about hiring people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. And I know we've had so many people that can't get past the onboarding process. So they get hired, but then the onboarding process is the exact same process it is for anybody who gets hired. And so I actually did, my son got hired at Lowe's, and the onboarding process was the exact same process that it was for everybody else, all on his own, on a computer, not his greatest strength, passing these series of tests that aren't even related to the job that he is going to do. So like he had to pass a job about driving a truck. He doesn't have a driver's license. So I told him that his job coach was my daughter, and she went in and she basically did all the training for him, but he could do the job. He just couldn't get past the onboarding process. The other thing, and this was brought up before too, is we deal with this all the time, not just with the job piece, but with residential, is that we are often left out of that whole diversity conversation, that it's not even considered when we talk about diversity. And so I think that's a really big issue that we would like to train possible employers on more. So right now, we are in a fortunate position that we are a recipient of a grant to basically educate employers about how to hire people who are neurodivergent, who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. We're in the South Metro area, and so we're going to really focus on that. Because what we just keep seeing is that people don't know how to interview, hire, train, and keep our individuals employed, even though our individuals are really capable of being great long-term employees. So what with this grant, we formed an oversight committee that consists of an individual with developmental disabilities, parents, and then businesses in the South Metro area. So our goal is to connect with all of them, survey them, meet with them, train them on what all of these individuals are capable of doing and how they could be great employees. And then our goal is then to use those results to help get additional funding to create a community employment program that goes beyond what we usually have with organizations that are providing job coaching. So, because most of the job coaches don't really even know the individuals very well. And they tend to go towards where people can get employed versus where they would like to be employed. So that's something I just, on all of the slides that you guys came up with, Sam and Amanda, my goal now is to go back to you guys as we start working on this program and have you give us a little help and resources for that as well, because what you're doing is great. So what we do know is that employers are deeply satisfied with individuals with developmental disabilities. They're long-term employees, and then employers are very satisfied with their performance and rank them as good to great in most cases. So ultimately on our site plan, this is a community event barn and the coffee shop, and where people will learn work skills in hospitality as well as in restaurant retail businesses. So they can stay working there if they'd like to, but our goal always is to move people through to advanced jobs and out in the community and hire more people in the coffee shops. So because it's so critical to their daily life to have meaningful employment, as you all know. So that's us. That's what we're trying to do right now. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Laura. And I want to thank the panel for their timing, because it was right on. And so we have just about 10 minutes for any questions or comments. I've been monitoring the chat, and it looks like any questions that might have come up in the chat have maybe been answered. But I think it's a small enough group so that if anybody really wants to ask a question, please come off mute if you can, and go ahead and ask your question of our panel. And I will continue to monitor the chat.
Hi, yes. Hey, Tim, and hey, everyone. My name is Anais, and I'm an advocate with the ARC of Larimer County. And thank you guys. This is some great information for not just us as advocates, but if we want to employ more individuals with IDD so that we can make ARC, have that ownership from those individuals that were supporting themselves. So thank you. I just had one quick question about working interviews. That sounded very interesting, and I believe it was Sam that might have mentioned that. So just curious if you could elaborate more about what a working interview might look like.
Sure. So for us specifically, we have three main functions. So we have the production line, which is typically going to be represented mostly by folks on the autistic spectrum, just because of the nature of the work.
Yes.
And then the same for our testing and refurbishment and resale department. And then obviously there's warehouse work. And it's kind of all over the board, but really the main thing is just trying to find what that employee is interested in. And sometimes it's nothing, right? So that's an important thing to identify as well, because it needs to be a good fit for both sides there, because there are some kids, and we've all talked about it, when they transition out and they sit at home too long, it's really hard for them to get reacclimated into the workforce. So some of the kids will come in and it's really at the behest of their parents. But specifically for the working interview, our ops manager will do just an initial tour, sometimes with the parents or caregiver or job coach, and then just to show them the main functions that we do, and then we'll just go through that. And then, but that training piece is done peer to peer. So while our manager will still be involved in that process, he's really counting on another peer, another supervisor with that's neurodivergent themselves, because we've really found that that's it's just speaking the language, right? And being comfortable with somebody is one of the hardest things. So we found that it's just that type of training, and so they'll go through a 4-hour shift basically of doing that training, and then all three will meet up. So what did you like, what didn't you like, and then we just go from there. That
is beautiful. We just recently got a grant to investigate the capabilities of a social enterprise for us, and so this is such great feedback that we can apply for that potential organization. So thank you so much.
I might add to that a little bit as well, Sam. I think one of the things is being really clear about what a job function entails. So one of the things we're really lucky at Firefly. We've got a really high number of neurodivergent employees. And what we make sure we do is do a walkthrough interview. So not just interview the person, but actually show them around and show them an example of what it looks like a day in the life kind of thing. You know, we're very clear, like certain jobs, as I mentioned, have very certain specific requirements, right? Like you cannot do this job from home. This has to be, you're in the center from 8 to 4, you're actively working with children.
Right.
And showing people what our learners, like what they look like in real life, right? We've got guys who are 6'4" and 250 pounds. So if you thought you were going to work with a 3-year-old who is, you know, up to your ankle, that's not really what that looks like. So I think you can explain things all day long, but making sure that you're actually showing what the work looks like. And I think that's what Sam is alluding to as well. And that's regardless of the individuals that you're hiring, I think is helpful.
Yes,
Yeah, I think
universally.
so many of the things that we put in place specifically for our neurodivergent employees, they ended up really helping us with the rest of our employees. So, you know, we had an employee at one of our warehouses that we didn't know was illiterate. And we had come up with all of the, you know, everything was pictures, because it's just, you know, if I hand somebody that's not a forklift mechanic a checklist for a forklift, I noticed they were just going through and yeah, everything looks good. But if I show pictures, this is what you're looking for. Is there a pool of oil below there? All these things, right? And then that really started to click. And then one of our employees came to us and was like, "This is so helpful because I've just been faking it for the last, you know, 9 to 10 months." So
That's beautiful, the curb cutting effect and that just using
Yeah.
universal designs, because a lot of employers I know will kind of gird their loins at the thought of, oh, having to implement all of these new things without thinking about those trickle down effects. And so thank you guys so much for what you do. And yeah, we would love to reach out and do a tour and see how we can apply some of those things here.
absolutely.
Excellent. Other questions or comments? Please come off of mute and identify yourself, and let's see what our panel thinks. Well, having not hearing any additional, and we are just about at time here, I will go ahead and thank our panel and thank everybody for being on the call today, and look forward to seeing you the next time. And I think the panel has put some of their information in the chat. If not, I think that they can probably all be reached at their places of business. And so please feel free to reach out to them, saying that on my behalf. And thank you very much, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Well done.